Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Ask an Expert session. My name is Shauna Thompson. I'm the Director of Mental Health and Wellness. And today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Frederick Dombrowski. So Dr. Dombrowski is an instructor here with Yorkville's MACP program. He has worked in the field of mental health since 1999 and has worked in higher education since 2010. He specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy and has worked in various treatment settings, including outpatient treatment, inpatient treatment, residential treatment, and at university counseling centers. Dr. Dombrowski's clinical expertise has contributed to multiple publications and awards specifically for his work working with those living with anxiety, chronic pain, and for his work with the LGBTQIA communities. So I will allow Dr. Dombrowski to get started, but while he's speaking and presenting to you, if you have any questions, feel free to look at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A tab, and you can select it and write any questions that you would like to ask to Dr. Dombrowski. So, with no further ado, he will speak to us on navigating the unknown.
Thank you so much, Shauna. I absolutely appreciate that. And I'm going to share my screen for some slides. If anyone would like a copy of these, I think that you'll have access to everything afterwards. But if you would like a copy, just feel free to reach out to Shauna, and I'll be happy to make sure you get a copy. And as everyone is enduring these times, it completely makes sense that people would have any anxiety or worries about the future, especially when we haven't endured anything like this before. And there are sometimes, even in a difficult situation, where our thoughts may actually make things worse, although our thoughts are entirely normal. So what I would like to talk to you today about are some basic standards of cognitive behavioral therapy that will help you to hopefully make the best decisions while you have to navigate through this difficult time. Some basic goals. What I'm hoping to do is to help you identify common problems that people will experience during a crisis, and also identify that during the crisis, that some of the ways our thoughts will happen may not be the best ways for us to actually view the problem. And hopefully provide you with some tools to help to be able to challenge your thoughts, to be able to change your outcomes. So if we think about our brains, what our brains are designed to do, our brains are actually like nature's natural computer, excuse me. And as your brain is a computer, your brain is constantly receiving information. And it also makes sense that your brain might be thinking about some stuff that's happening before, and your brain is trying to figure out what you're going to do in the future. Within that, especially during a crisis, our brain likes to run all these simulations. So what should I do in case this happens? What should I do in case that happens? And that's completely normal for our brains to do because we're trying to make sure that we have everything planned out to be safe. The only thing that kind of stinks about that is during a crisis, when we don't know what's going to happen, our brains will kind of go into overdrive to try to figure out everything. As our brains are going into overdrive, we're actually giving ourselves additional anxiety. So, for example, during the crisis, you might be thinking, what's going to happen afterwards? Is the economy going to be over? Is life ever going to get back to normal? And when you have those thoughts actually might make you feel even more anxious. Sometimes we're not even aware of what we're thinking. And our immediate responses may not be helpful. During those instances, we might be overwhelmed by emotion. So I just have a quick question for everyone that's attending. Has anyone ever had a time where like you're maybe arguing with someone and during the argument, you're really frustrated and you say something, and as soon as like that last word comes out of your mouth, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm such a jerk. I shouldn't have said that. We all have that. So I'll definitely say that I do that for sure. Like we all definitely have that. So the idea is to help you be aware of that process of what's happening on the inside. So then you could interrupt that. So then you don't say that thing or you don't do that thing. Currently, what we're seeing right now during this crisis is that people might isolate. Obviously, we're in forced isolation. And although here in the United States, some states are opening up, not everything is opening up at the same time, at the same rate. And even when things do open up, it's still normal for people to be worried about going outside. Some people may cope with this by increasing their alcohol use, increasing their substance use. Um, within the within the United States, everything is closed, but the liquor stores are still open. It kind of unfortunately becomes a new coping strategy. Within that, some people might place themselves in risky situations where they just get so sick of it. I'm so sick of hearing about COVID. I'm just going to go outside without wearing my mask. I don't care. Other people just might avoid activities that they used to enjoy, avoid friends. Within this, when we're living with this constant stress, we're going to be more prone to anxiety. We're going to be more prone to irritability. And then also rumination. And what's really tough is you can have a completely great day where everything is okay. And that one thing may happen that gets you mad. And then you just might be thinking about that thing over and over and over again. So there is a process between when something bad happens to when we have a reaction. So we will have triggers. The triggers, they could be anything. Someone could say hi to us. Most of our triggers are benign. For me, I think about my triggers. I have a huge trigger whenever I'm driving and someone cuts me off. I get an automatic feeling, then an automatic negative thought. There is a process. Right after a trigger, we have a thought, even if we're not paying attention to our thoughts. So if I'm driving and someone cuts me off, I might have the thought, it's not that I might, I actually do have the thought of, this guy's a jerk. This guy doesn't care. This guy's trying to hurt me. I might not pay attention to those thoughts, but those thoughts are there. As a result, I'm then going to have a feeling. I'm going to feel angry that this guy cut me off. So my action is I'm going to zoom around that guy, give him a dirty look, and then speed by him. And then because of my actions, the cops are going to pull me over and I'm going to get a ticket. So we have the trigger, the guy cutting me off, the thought, this guy's a jerk, I'll show him. The feeling, I'm very angry and frustrated. My action is I'm going to speed by him, and that action isn't helpful for me. Within this, specifically for COVID, what we're seeing are within this aspect, I can't do this, what's wrong with me, everyone was looking at me. And we see this a lot for people that have social anxiety. If you think about instances where you felt that you aren't able to do something, you would have that thought, I can't do this. And then from there, it gives you the behavior where you escape from the situation, try to avoid it in the future, and it gives you anxiety even thinking about it. Within our thoughts, there are some just good old-fashioned different subjects of thoughts that we have that we relatively do all the time while we're unaware that these thoughts are not necessarily accurate. So I loved this a saying that said, don't believe everything that you think, because we can think multiple things at once. So we could have certain instances where we could think more rationally and other times where we'll just be so focused in on our emotion. So let's think about all or nothing thinking. Has anyone ever had that day when you say, like, that's it, nothing's going right for me, it's just terrible, I can't do anything right? And within that, you're kind of forgetting that you've done everything right before that time where you messed up. It's kind of that instance where you kind of feel like that one thing ruins the entire day. Kind of like we were talking about the rumination with earlier. You could have a totally fine day, that one thing bothers you, and you just focus in on that. Then from there, you could have the overgeneralization. And that is where one event falsely becomes applied to everyone. So I think about, I had a great discussion with with the other panelists earlier, and I am a huge sports fan. And whenever my football team loses, I have that thought of, that's it, everything's going to suck forever, we're never going to win. That is an overgeneralization. We also have a mental filter, and what our mental filter does is it will often not focus in on things that are positive or things that are neutral, but rather we focus in on the things that are negative. So if someone says something nice to you, you don't necessarily hear it, but if someone says something that's frustrating or aggravating or mean to you, that is the thing that you would find yourself focusing in on. We also have instances where we may disqualify the positive. What that means is we could be presented with several different options, but for some reason we focus in on the worst options or the most frustrating options. The next one is one of my favorites, mind reading. We all do this. We all assume what another person is thinking. Have you ever had a time where you got into a fight with your significant other and you said the words, "You think dot, 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 dot." Even though I have a PhD in counseling, I promise you I have no idea what anyone is thinking. And the only way I could ever find out is by asking them. Personalization, that's where we kind of feel like someone is personally attacking us, even though they're not. And this can happen a lot, especially if you see someone outside and they're not wearing a mask. It could kind of feel like it's a personal attack. From their fortune telling, we kind of assume what's going to happen in the future. And from there, we may catastrophize. Only bad things are going to happen in the future. The next one is also one of my favorites, emotional reasoning. Our emotions are real, and our emotions don't always represent reality. Let me say that again. Your emotions are real, and how your emotions impact your thought process may not always represent reality. What that means is our intense emotional state will impact how we view reality. Next one is one of my favorites, should statements. I should do this better. I should do that better. They should treat me with more respect. Labeling. So this guy's an idiot. This guy's a jerk, as opposed to thinking about this guy has instances where he can be a jerk. And the last one is the one I struggle with the most, fallacy of fairness. I have this belief that if you work hard, if you're a good person, that things should work out for you. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. That is the fallacy of fairness. While we're discussing this, you may have instances where you have a trigger and then you'll find yourself thinking some of those thoughts. What's kind of hard is if you continue to allow yourself to think those thoughts, you're going to get frustrated or sad or angry. And then from there, you'll have an outcome where you'll act in a way that is not beneficial for you. So these are some good thought challenging questions, which I would ask my clients, but I also ask myself. And one of my favorite questions to ask is, what is the evidence for or against this thought? So let's go back to the guy that cuts me off in traffic. I would think that this guy is a jerk. Well, what's the evidence for the thought? Well, the guy cut me off. What's the evidence against the thought? Well, the guy could be in a rush. He could be going to the hospital. There could be other things happening. Another question I like to ask myself is, what would I tell someone else in the same situation? And it's kind of funny because we are often nicer to others than we are to ourselves. We have this expectation that we should know everything. And then when someone else is going through the same situation, we'll be a lot more supportive. Another good question to ask yourself is helping me this way is thinking this way helping me or hurting me? And in some instances, our thoughts are hurting us. Another good question to ask is, how have I handled this before? What is the worst that could realistically happen and how possible is it? How have others handled this situation and how would I like to respond? So even in situations where something bad is happening and your thoughts are accurate and it's a bad situation, you have to ask yourself, what is the best way for me to respond in this? So this right here is one of my favorite worksheets that you can do with yourself. You could actually write down what your trigger is and then write down what your automatic thought is. List your feelings, like are you feeling angry, sad, frustrated? And then you could rate the feelings on 0 to 10 and then identify how you would normally act in that situation. You then look at your thoughts and look at the cognitive distortions that I listed and say, are any of these thoughts distortions? And then ask those questions that we just reviewed to your old thoughts and then come up with new thoughts that are more accurate. When you actually write down your new thoughts will make you feel better. I'm not going to say that your anxiety is going to go away 100% or your sadness or your frustration is going to go away 100%, but it's going to go away enough that's going to help you be able to make a better decision and act in a way that's going to be better to help you meet your goals. So make sure you pay attention to after how you challenge your thoughts, you then see how you're feeling afterwards. But the most important thing, although it's important to challenge your thoughts and it's important to be aware of what you're thinking at the time, you will find that when you have new and better actions to respond to your triggers, that is ultimately what's going to make you feel better. So we can't always control everything around us, and we can control ourselves. So we can't control if someone's being rude to us, and we could walk away from a situation saying, you know what, that was a terrible situation, but I know I handled that the best I could. So sometimes, as I was saying, like bad things do happen. our thoughts might make it worse. And if we challenge our thoughts, it'll hopefully help us have an option to be able to make the best decisions. So with that, I would like to open up this opportunity for any questions or any chats or anything that anyone would have. This is a very quick run through of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. So the first question that we have is, can you give some suggestions for calming your mind when you have racing thoughts, especially considering uncertainty during this time?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. And when I work with people that have panic attacks, it's hard for me to ask them what they're thinking because the anxiety is so intense. So what I ask people to do, I ask them to engage in active mindfulness techniques. And what that means is engaging in techniques that involve all of your senses. So sometimes I'll have people play Jenga, as ridiculous as that sounds, but it forces people to focus in on the Jenga because you don't want it to fall down. Other times, I ask people if they're having a snack to actually pay attention to the snack. For example, uh, we've all eaten Skittles before. And usually when I eat Skittles, I'll put like a dozen Skittles in my mouth at a time and just, I'm not paying any attention. I can taste that it's sweet. However, what I encourage people to do is actually take the Skittle, feel what it feels like, smell it, put it in your mouth, feel what it feels like then bite into it, see how it tastes like, and then do that through each color of the Skittles. As weird, as lame, as like ridiculous as that sounds, that's one of the ways that we do that. Also, I love music. So um, I'm really dating myself here, but there is a band, Metallica. They have the song Enter Sandman. And you can go on YouTube, you can listen to that song. But you could also go on YouTube and when you could listen to that song, but you could only listen to the drum tracks. And you'll find that if you only listen to the drums without everything else, the drums sound different. Then you can only listen to the guitar, listen to the vocals, and then you could listen to the whole song again and then focus in on each instrument. So those are some ways of being actively mindful.
Okay, thank you. And the next question here is asking about suggestions for being able to sleep better.
That's a great question because for me, one thing I cannot tolerate is I cannot tolerate if my sleep schedule is disrupted. And especially during this time, it makes sense that our schedule is disrupted, especially if you're like at home, if you're working from home, our boundaries have been impacted. And then in addition, if you're up at night thinking about some of the things that we have concerns about. So first things first, I usually start off with these words that everyone hates, and I'm very sorry if I offend you with this, but it's sleep hygiene. And what that means is we have to treat our sleep schedule the same way we would treat our physical bodies. Like we would wake up every day, we would take a shower, we would take care of ourselves. So we have to make sure that we practice good sleep hygiene. And there are some basic things. Number one, like avoiding like caffeinated beverages, like within 8 hours before you go to bed. Another thing about that is making sure that you get up every day at the same time and try to get up at a time that you want to get up, at a time that you decide to get up at, and setting an alarm at that. So therefore, if you can't get to sleep until 3 o'clock in the morning, but in a perfect world, you would like to wake up at 8, I'm going to ask you to wake up at 8 anyways, even if you got to sleep at 3. And then continue to do that. One of the benefits of doing that is that eventually your body is going to force itself to fall asleep earlier. Then in addition, also good sleep hygiene is just putting your phone down. Like that's so I try not to look at my phone for like an hour and a half or like respond to any emails or anything like that before I go to bed. And in addition to that too, like, making sure the light is off, you're in a comfortable spot, and make sure, especially with everything that's happening now, I just allow myself only 1 hour to watch the news a day. So continue to look for new information can also increase our anxiety. So I hope that gives you some aspects. And I'd still encourage you, like, if you want to adjust the sleep time, go to bed at a time you want to go to bed at, even if that means you're lying in bed for a while. I do apologize. And if it persists, you can talk to your primary doctor just to see if there's anything else going on.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked if you could repeat the idea of true emotions but not true reality.
Yes, yes, I can see how that's I can see how that comes off, and it's kind of doesn't make much sense. So when you are experiencing an emotion, if something bad happens to you, let's suppose I come up to you, I don't know you, but I say, hey, you're a jerk. If I say that, it would completely make sense that you would be angry with me for saying that. So your emotion is real, your emotion is valid, and you have a really good reason for feeling that. However, though, if you respond by having that emotion drive your response, you may exacerbate the situation. So your emotion might tell you that this guy just called me a jerk, it's time to fight. And then you could get, unfortunately, arrested for getting into a fight, as opposed to saying, yes, I'm feeling angry about this. And one of the best things for me to do is just leave this crazy guy alone, focus in on my friends. Let's do that. So your emotion is valid. What you're feeling at that moment makes sense. And if we respond to that emotion in that emotional state, that emotion will prevent us from looking at the entire picture. And when we don't look at the entire picture, it's hard for us to make a good decision. I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to ask another question. I'm happy to talk about it more.
Okay, the next question is, and it's here a few times, people are asking for suggestions on how to support a friend who may be isolated or isolating themselves and really in need of some of this information that you're sharing with us.
That's a great question, and I really appreciate everyone who asked that question. It can be torture on us when we see people that we love engaging in some of these reactions, and the reactions are normal, but we want to do whatever we can to help them change what they're doing so they can feel better. Within that, what is kind of tough is it's very human for us to argue with our friends and family, especially when we love them. And what stinks about that is when we do it, it actually makes the person do those negative things even more. So what I do encourage you to do is when you do have the contact with them, validate their experience and identify, what their reaction and how they're reacting, and validate it first and foremost. Makes sense. I'm very sorry to hear this. And validation doesn't mean that you agree with it. It just means that from their perspective, it makes sense that they got to that position. Within there, you can also just say, hey, listen, I love you. I'm worried about you. Within this, is there any way we could get you linked up with someone to talk to? Or if you have access to this, if you have access to these slides, I'm happy to share the slides. If you have access to these, you can even forward these slides to your friend. Within that, though, what kind of stinks is one of the benefits of having people see a therapist is that for some reason we tend to disqualify our friends and family. So a therapist could tell us the same thing our friends and family have told us, but we'll listen to the therapist before we listen to our friends and family. I don't know why that is. So within that, you don't want to ruin the relationship. So that's one of the benefits of validating where the person is coming from and possibly encouraging them to get some help and giving them this information. You could say, hey, I was at this Q&A the other day. It was a really good thing, and they gave some really good responses as to how we could challenge ourselves. Do you mind if I share this information with you? And then even go through it. And the cognitive distortions are hilarious because we all do them. And I love laughing at myself. So hopefully that would give you an opportunity for you and your friend to connect and laugh together. And hopefully that would make them feel a little better too.
Thank you. Another question is related to control. So during these uncertain times, when people feel really a lack of control, how is that something that they can cope with using the information you've shared here today?
So that's a great question. I think that when we have a lack of control, we might feel out of control. And so that's actually a distortion. So while you do not have control over the decision as to whether or not to allow people out or decision to open up restaurants, you still do have some control over yourself. So you still have some autonomy. You can still wear a mask. We know for sure that we have to practice good hygiene. You can still contact people. So it's important for us to find what we do have control over. So for me, like I still have control of connecting with my friends. And my friends and I were so ridiculous and stupid. So we do like Zoom meetings every Fridays. And we have like in our Zoom meetings, we have like stupid themes. So like one night it was like sports night. And last week it was mustache night. So just like random things, like you do have some control. So what I do ask you to do is really focus in on the things that you do have control over. And it's frustrating when we're waiting for other people to tell us what to do. And especially if you have a business and you're kind of waiting for that feedback. So whatever you do have control over, I'm asking that you utilize the most with that. And the stuff that you don't have control over, it's normal that you would think about that, but then refocusing on things that you do have control of.
Okay, so there have been a few questions here about people sharing some of their personal situations and concerns and saying that really this time is a discouraging time. It's a time that can really engender a lot of feelings of sadness. So do you have any words of encouragement really to share with the group on how they can still move forward in spite of the uncertainty?
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. And I really appreciate your honesty about that. And thank you so much for the people that have shared that, because this is a really sad time. And I think that what you're feeling is entirely valid. With that though, I'm like I'm not necessarily an optimist, but I'm more of a realist. So I'm not here to tell you that things are going to get better. I don't know what's going to happen. But I am here to tell you that although I don't know you, I believe that you must have done some things right in your life and that you've been able to make it this far with your education and your career. So I believe that you have some really good skills. And this is a difficult time. While I don't know you, though, I guarantee that you've had other bad times happen in the past. And what I'm asking you to do is think about those times that you have endured and how you've actually come through those times. So yes, this is a bad time. And what is some evidence that you can tell, like you don't know me, but if you had to describe, write down or identify ways that you've overcome things in the past, even when you felt like this before, although this is unique, but have times where you're like, I don't know if things are going to get better, and you've made it through. So my words of encouragement are you have made it through before. You have some really good skills. You most likely have people around you that love you and people that you love. So connecting with all these things and also focusing on what you can control is helpful. I really honestly do believe that we are going to get through this. I work with, being outside of New York City, I work with a lot of people that were present during ground zero during 9/11, and they lived through that. And they were able to find a normal after that. So I believe that they can do it. I believe that you can do it. It's frustrating. I'm very sorry if it feels frustrating for some guy who doesn't know you to say you can do it. I don't mean it to be frustrating, but you are showing me some evidence that you can get through it.
Okay, thank you so much for those words of encouragement, as well as all of the helpful information that you shared with this presentation. We have received some wonderful feedback, and thank you all to the participants for your questions, your comments, for being so open, and for everything that you've shared. So another common question was, can this presentation be made available? So we will work on getting that sent out, because I understand that it would be helpful for a lot of you to be able to review this information later on. And it is time to close. So I do once again want to thank you very much, Dr. Dombrowski, for this presentation and for all that you've shared. And for everyone else, we do continue having our Ask an Expert series every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And next week, we will be talking about APA format. So thank you, everyone. Take care and have a wonderful weekend.